Welcome back, my friend. Tonight, we enter a darker and more powerful age of medieval London. Through Edward I's iron rule, Edward II's troubled fall, Edward III's wars and the Black Death, and Richard II's flames of rebellion. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let the ancient city carry you towards sleep. Subscribe to Deep Sleep Storytelling for more peaceful journeys through history, science, and the mysteries of the sea.
Edward I, the hammer of kings and London's new authority. When Henry III died in 1272, London did something unusual. It didn't panic. It didn't whisper nervously. It didn't wait anxiously at the gates. It didn't even look around wondering, who's in charge now? Because Edward, Henry's eldest son, was already a legend. Strong, tall, sharp-minded, battle-tested, respected by nobles, admired by soldiers, and, perhaps most importantly for London, decisive. He was away on crusade when his father died, but London did not hesitate to accept him as king. For the first time in a long time, the transition of power felt almost calm. It was as though the city whispered, "Yes, this is right." And so began the reign of Edward I, the king who would reshape England's laws, extend its military reach, and leave a mark on London deeper than anyone since William the Conqueror. The bare-knuckle nature of a new king. Edward was not his father. Henry III was gentle, artistic, emotional, religious, the kind of king who would insist on repainting palace walls 3 times because the gold leaf wasn't shimmery enough. Edward, on the other hand, was a king who approached problems with the energy of someone holding a very large hammer and believing everything might be a nail. He was disciplined, efficient, strategic, cold at times, brilliant often, relentless always. London respected him immediately. Here was a monarch who understood law, order, taxes, trade, warfare, and the needs of a growing empire. London, wealthy, powerful, ambitious, thrived under such a king. A city of contracts, coins, and courts. Edward I loved law, not in the abstract, philosophical way, but in the practical, efficient, let's fix this broken medieval bureaucracy way. Under him, courts expanded. New legal reforms were passed. Property rights were clarified. Contracts standardized. Statutes written. Judges traveled more frequently. Sheriffs were held accountable. Corruption was punished. And the crown's authority over the realm solidified. London became the beating heart of this legal revolution. The city's merchants rejoiced. Law meant predictability, predictability meant safety. Safety meant profit. And profit? Well, London has always had opinions about profit. The Great Welsh campaigns, London pays, London profits. Edward I turned his attention first to Wales. For centuries, English kings claimed lordship over Wales, with about as much success as someone trying to claim ownership of a wild mountain goat. But Edward was determined. He launched a series of enormous military campaigns, building stone castles that still dominate the Welsh landscape today. Caernarfon, Conwy, Harlech, and more. These projects required money, masons, carpenters, grain, weapons, ships, wagons, armor, officials, supplies, and endless administrative support. Where did much of this come from? London. London merchants provided materials. London guilds provided craftsmen. London markets provided grain. London banks provided credit. London ports provided ships. Every hammer strike in Wales echoed faintly through London's economy. London grows and groans. The late 13th century was a time of rapid expansion. Population surged. Suburbs grew. Parishes expanded. Markets overflowed. Trade routes widened. Foreign merchants flocked to the city. New wharves were built. The Thames buzzed day and night. Guilds became political powerhouses. London was becoming a metropolis in a world that barely had the word for such a thing. But with growth came problems, sanitation issues, overcrowding, fire hazards, crime, disputes, and rising tensions between rich and poor. Edward I dealt with these problems the way he dealt with everything, with law. Lots of law. New ordinances regarding pricing, weights and measures, markets, trade regulations, guild oversight, public order, city taxes, river management, and building safety. Some Londoners admired him, some feared him, but everyone obeyed him. The Jewish community in London, a tragic turn. One of the darkest aspects of Edward's reign was his treatment of England's Jewish population. London had a significant Jewish community. Scholars, merchants, financiers, highly skilled, deeply integrated into the city's economy. But anti-Jewish sentiment ran deep in medieval Europe. Under pressure, financial, religious, and political. Edward issued the Edict of Expulsion in 1290. All Jews were to leave England London watched families pack their lives into boxes, homes abandoned, synagogues closed, books carried carefully to ships at the docks. It was a wound on the city, one that would not heal for centuries. A city that thrived on diversity lost a part of itself. In the calm of night, one imagines London murmuring, "This was not our finest hour." The Scottish Wars, a kingdom on the move. If Edward's campaigns in Wales had been impressive, his campaigns in Scotland were monumental. He sought to bring Scotland under English control. Wars erupted. Castles fell. Rebellions sparked. Names like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce entered legend. London, distant from the battles, felt the impact in other ways. Increased taxation, military requisitions, legal documents, treasury demands, propaganda, political tension, but also wealth from supplying the war effort, expanded administrative roles, growing influence in Parliament, and a deeper sense of its role in national politics. By the late 1200s, London was not merely the largest city in England. It was the center of England's empire-building machinery. Enter Parliament, London takes a seat at the table. Edward I did not invent Parliament, but he formalized it, strengthened it, and made it a regular instrument of governance. London loved this. Representatives from the city, usually members of wealthy guilds, sat in assemblies beside nobles and bishops. They discussed taxation, trade, war funding, legal reforms, city liberties, national policy. For the first time, London's voice shaped the kingdom, not through rebellion or negotiation, but through structured political participation. It was a powerful moment. The city was no longer a bystander, it was a player. The Statue of the Realm, law as architecture. Edward's legal reforms were so comprehensive that chroniclers compared them to rebuilding the kingdom from the foundation. Key statutes: Westminster, 1, 2, 3, Gloucester, Mortmain, Winchester, Quo Warranto, Quia Emptores. London felt these laws intimately. Contracts became clearer. Property disputes more manageable. Merchants gained protections. Corporations became standardized. Guilds became formalized. Criminal justice became more predictable. The city grew stronger, not only through commerce, but through clarity. Order was wealth. Law was stability. Stability was prosperity. London's new identity at the turn of the century. By the year 1300, London was no longer the city Henry II inherited, or the city Henry III rebuilt. It was something far more formidable. 80,000 inhabitants, miles of wharves, hundreds of guilds, powerful merchant families, a city government with increasing autonomy, international banking connections, a dominant wool trade, an influential voice in parliament, fortified walls, and a skyline rising ever higher in stone and glass. It was a capital in everything but name, a hub of law, a furnace of commerce, a stage of politics, a magnet for ambition, and above it all, Edward I's firm rule kept order. London grew ambitious under him, braver, sharper, more confident. It had become too big to be ignored, too wealthy to be controlled easily, too vital to the kingdom to be sidelined. The king's final years, a quiet thunder. Edward I's strength lasted into old age, but even hammers eventually crack. By the early 1300s, illness slowed him. The Scottish wars drained resources. Political tensions simmered. Reforms began to stretch thin. He died in 1307, on campaign in the north, still trying to bend Scotland to his will. London received the news with deep respect. This was a king who had given the city law, authority, structure, political representation, economic expansion, and a place in the machinery of empire. A king who had shaped the very bones of England. London bowed its head, not in fear, but in solemn acknowledgement. A chapter had ended. A new one would begin. With Edward II, a king very unlike his father. But that is a story for the next chapter. Edward II, a fallen king in a city that refused to fall. When Edward I died in 1307, London felt the ground shift beneath its feet. For nearly 40 years, the city had lived under a king carved from iron, a ruler who treated law like architecture and war like a daily profession. Now his son, Edward II, ascended the throne, and London, wise from centuries of experience, studied the young king with wary curiosity. He was tall and handsome, gentle in manner, fond of music, poetry, and theater, more comfortable in gardens than in war camps, more at ease with friends than with advisors, more enamored with pleasure than with policy. If Edward I was the hammer, Edward II was a cushion. London did not say this out loud, of course, but the city had a feeling. A soft king in a hard age rarely ends well. A coronation full of promise and warnings. Edward II was crowned in 1308 at Westminster Abbey, the magnificent Gothic church his grandfather had envisioned, and his father continued to support. The coronation was lavish: golden banners, rich tapestries, the smell of incense, chanting monks, nobles glittering in jewels, crowds cheering along the streets, trumpets echoing off the river. But one detail alarmed London. At the coronation banquet, Edward II gave the place of honor, not to his queen, Isabella of France, nor to the great nobles of England, but to his beloved friend, Piers Gaveston. Gaveston was charming, witty, flamboyant, and utterly uninterested in being subtle. He strutted through court like a man who believed. Everyone else existed for his amusement. Londoners whispered, "This is not going to go well." Not at all. Absolutely not. They were correct. Enter Gaveston, the spark that lit a kingdom. Edward II adored Gaveston. He showered him with titles, land, money, influence, all the ingredients guaranteed to irritate the nobility. And irritate them he did. Nobles growled, barons scowled, the royal council fumed. The Queen's relatives in France raised eyebrows. Even London, normally a master of neutrality, felt uneasy. Gaveston mocked powerful lords with nicknames that would make a modern politician faint. The Black Dog, the Hog, the Burst Belly. Medieval England was many things, but it was not a place where mocking barons ended well for anyone. London under a neglectful king. While Edward lavished attention on Gaveston, London felt neglected. Edward II did not share his father's appetite for administration. He preferred music over meetings, pageantry over policy, leisurely river rides over treasury accounts, and personal companionship over national obligation. London's merchants muttered, "Does the king understand the economy?" Guild leaders whispered, "Does he care about law?" Officials muttered, "Has he read any of his father's statutes?" Still, London endured. It always did. The city's machinery of trade and governance was strong enough to function despite a distracted monarch. But a kingdom cannot survive on autopilot forever. The ordinances of 1311, the barons strike back. By 1311, the barons had had enough. They forced Edward to accept the ordinances, a set of laws that limited royal power, regulated finances, and, most importantly, banished Gaveston. London approved. The city vendors nodded. Guildsmen clapped quietly. Clerks smiled into their ink pots. The tower guards stood a little taller. For a moment, it seemed like the crisis might end peacefully, but Edward brought Gaveston back. Again. And again, and again, London sighed audibly. Gaveston's tragic end. In 1312, the barons took matters into their own hands. They captured Gaveston and executed him. It was brutal, terrible, and illegal. But Edward's inflexibility had left them no choice, at least in their eyes. When news reached London, the city fell silent, not in celebration, not in grief, but in resignation. The balance of power had shattered. The king was humiliated. The barons were emboldened, and the kingdom was slipping towards civil war. London whispered, "This is far from over." The rise of the dispensers. Trouble again. After Gaveston's death, Edward needed new favorites. He found them in the Despenser family, father and son. If Gaveston irritated the nobles, the Despensers enraged them. They acquired enormous lands, interfered with justice, manipulated the king, punished opponents, and behaved like medieval mob bosses with excellent manners. London watched uneasily as tension rose once again. The London of the 1310s, a city under strain. While political drama consumed the royal court, London faced its own challenges. Food shortages, bad harvests, rising prices, merchant anxieties, weather disasters. The early 1300s saw the beginning of the Little Ice Age. Cold, rain, famine creeping slowly across Europe, crime and instability, crowded streets, poor sanitation, growing inequality, tensions between wealthy merchant guilds and poorer laborers. London was booming, but not equally. A king unable to provide steady leadership. Edward II simply didn't have the temperament for crisis management. London carried on, but the city now felt the weight of a heavy sky. The Queen steps in. Isabella of France. Queen Isabella. Intelligent, cultured, politically astute, watched her husband flounder. She had tried to work with him, tried to stabilize the court, tried to mediate with the barons, but Edward's obsession with the Despensers made compromise impossible. In 1325, Isabella traveled to France to negotiate peace between England and her homeland. She did not return. Instead, she formed an alliance with a powerful noble named Roger Mortimer. Together, with support from exiled barons and foreign allies, they raised an army. London held its breath. The fall of a king. London chooses a side. In 1326, Isabella and Mortimer landed in England. Their forces grew rapidly. Edward II fled London. The dispensers fled with him. Royal authority collapsed like soft wax in sunlight. London faced a choice: support the king, or support the Queen and the reformers. The city chose the Queen. London opened its gates to Isabella. Crowds cheered. Guilds pledged support. Merchants provided funds. The Tower surrendered. It was the same instinct that had guided London in 1215. The city opposed leaders who endangered stability, and Edward II had endangered everything. The dispensers' end and the king's abdication. The dispensers were captured and executed. Edward II, exhausted, defeated, and abandoned by nearly everyone, was forced to abdicate in early 1327 in favor of his son, Edward III, a boy of 14. London did not celebrate. The city was somber. Edward II's fall was tragic, the result of temperament, poor judgment, and circumstances he could not master. A soft king in a hard age rarely survives. London reflects a city that endured everything. By the end of Edward II's reign, London had survived corrupt favorites, civil unrest, famine, economic strain, political collapse, invasion, a forced abdication, and a shift in royal power. And yet the city remained stronger than ever. Why? Because London had mastered the art of adaptation. It understood how to protect its markets, when to negotiate, when to rebel, when to align, when to endure, and when to change course. London was no longer merely a city under the crown. It was now a political force, a guardian of national stability. And with the ascension of Edward III, a new era was about to begin. An era of war, wealth, plague, power, and a transformation that would test London more than any crisis before. Edward III, war, wealth, plague, and the making of a medieval super city. When 14-year-old Edward III became king in 1327, London felt something it had not felt in years. Hope. A boy king, yes. Young. Inexperienced, certainly. But there was something in his eyes. A spark. A steadiness. A quiet determination that London recognized instantly. This child, the city thought, might grow into the king England needed. But for now, the kingdom was not ruled by Edward. Not really. Power rested in the hands of two people: Queen Isabella, his formidable mother, and Roger Mortimer, her ambitious partner. They governed in the boy's name, and at first, London accepted it. After the chaos of Edward II, a functioning government of any kind felt like a warm blanket, but warm blankets can smother just as easily as they comfort. And soon, London sensed danger. A puppet king in a dangerous court. At first, Isabella and Mortimer ruled competently, restoring order, securing borders, managing finances, stabilizing courts. London's guilds breathed easier. Merchants reopened their ledgers. The city returned to its usual rhythm. Ships docking, bells chiming, markets clattering. But ambition has sharp edges. Mortimer grew arrogant. He treated the young king like a decorative statue, useful for ceremonies, irrelevant in decisions. He awarded himself titles, lands, wealth. He punished rivals. He controlled council meetings. He stood behind the throne like a shadow with a crown. London murmured, "This looks familiar. We've seen this story before. It did not end well last time." The city watched closely, because if London had developed any superpower in the Middle Ages, it was the ability to smell political trouble, long before it arrived at the gates. The night the boy became king. In 1330, at just 17, Edward III made his move. Under the cover of night, with a handful of loyal companions, he surprised Mortimer at Nottingham Castle. Through a secret passage, Mortimer was arrested. Isabella was placed under comfortable house arrest, and Edward, calm and resolute, announced, "I will govern in my own name." London exhaled. Finally, a real king. One with a mind like tempered steel and a will like a drawn bow. The era of Edward III had begun. A city awakening under a young visionary. Edward III was everything a medieval king was supposed to be. Charismatic, intelligent, disciplined, brave, ambitious, politically skilled, financially shrewd, militarily gifted, and London loved him for it. Under Edward, the city flourished like never before. Trade expanded, guilds grew richer, shipping intensified, markets overflowed, foreign merchants arrived in droves. The royal court glittered with festivals and ceremony. The administrative machine hummed like a well-tuned instrument. London was becoming not just a great city of England, but a great city of Europe. But this prosperity came with a price, because Edward III had a dream, a huge, shimmering dream, and dreams in the Middle Ages required armies. The root of a century of war, Edward III believed he had a claim to the throne of France through his mother, Isabella. The French disagreed. Europe held its breath. London sharpened its quills. counted its coins and began preparing for something enormous. The 100 Years' War, one of the most famous conflicts in human history. Of course, London didn't know it would last a century. Everyone assumed it would be quick. Everyone was wrong. War fuels a city. War is destruction, yes, but it is also movement of money, ships, supplies, diplomacy, and administration. London spun like a wheel in motion. Armorers forged weapons, shipbuilders expanded docks, merchants financed expeditions, bankers arranged loans, scribes produced endless documents, warehouses filled with wool exports to Flanders, soldiers marched through city gates. The tower bristled with activity. War was costly, but it also pumped gold into London's bloodstream, and the city grew stronger. Crécy, Calais, and the Lion's Roar. Edward III's campaigns were shocking in their success. 1,337. War declared. 1,340. Victory at Sluys, where England destroyed the French fleet. 1,346. The legendary Battle of Crécy. 1,347. The siege and capture of Calais. London roared with pride. When news of Crécy reached the city, bells rang across all parishes, merchants toasted in taverns, guild masters boasted in the streets. Victory meant safety. Victory meant prestige. Victory meant trade. But triumph carries shadows. And the darkest shadow in European history was drifting silently toward London. The Black Death arrives. It began as whispers, rumors from the continent, stories of towns emptying overnight, villages silent, churchyards overflowing. London pretended not to hear. Merchants kept working. Guilds held meetings. The city moved, loud and busy as always. But plague does not respect walls, wealth, or willpower. It came by ship, slipping into London with the tide. No one saw it arrive, but everyone felt it. The Black Death swept through the city, like a shadow made of knives. People fell ill suddenly. Streets emptied. Families barricaded themselves indoors. Church bells tolled endlessly. Graveyards overflowed. The scent of burning incense filled the air. Clergy worked until they collapsed. Physicians were powerless. Markets fell silent. London, the city that never stopped moving, was brought to its knees. Some chroniclers said 1/3 of the city died. Others said half. The truth is lost, but the sorrow remains. And yet, London survived. Slowly, painfully, steadily. because London always survives. A city that rose from ashes. When the plague receded, London felt like a ghost of itself. Empty homes, silent workshops, abandoned docks, shattered families, fields without workers, a treasury strained. But from this devastation came unexpected change. Labor was suddenly precious. Workers could demand higher wages. Guilds reorganized. Women took on new roles in business. Survivors gained opportunities once impossible. London became more flexible, wealthier, and socially transformed. The city's resilience stunned Europe. The golden age of chivalry, a royal court reborn. Edward III believed that after tragedy, a kingdom needed beauty. So he created a court that shimmered like legend. Tournaments glittered with armor. Feasts lasted for days. Poetry echoed in halls. The Order of the Garter was founded, a chivalric fellowship that still exists today. Windsor Castle expanded. Westminster thrived. London Bridge bustled, and royal ceremonies dazzled the city. For a moment, London felt like the center of a reborn world. War continued, yes, but London now balanced war and culture, conflict and creativity. It was becoming something new, a medieval super city. The king's final years, a quiet decline. As Edward III aged, the brilliance of his youth faded. Illness crept in. Grief took hold as family members died. Factions formed at court. His ambitious son, Edward, the Black Prince, the shining star of the royal house, fell sick and died in 1376. London mourned deeply. The city rang bells for days. Guilds held vigils. Merchants closed shops. A year later, in 1377, Edward III died. London lost a king who had led it through triumph and devastation, war and plague, building a city stronger than ever. He was not perfect. No king was, but he had left London. Wealthy, confident, fiercely resilient. And through him, the city had stepped fully into the late Middle Ages. As the beating heart of England, a new king now rose, Richard II, young and fragile, and London sensed that the next era would not be easy, but the city, wiser than any monarch, was ready. It always was. Richard II. Pride, poetry, and the flames of rebellion. When Edward III died in 1377, the crown passed once more to a child, a boy of just 10 years old, Richard II. London stared at its new king with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. A child on the throne was risky, but England had seen young kings before. Sometimes they grew into greatness, but Richard would be something different. Not a warrior like his grandfather, not a reformer like his namesake Richard I, not a builder like Henry III. Richard II was a dreamer, a poet, a lover of beauty, ritual, and divine kingship. He imagined the world not as it was, but as he believed it should be, a vision that would someday lift him high and someday cast him down. And London, the ever-practical city, would stand at the center of his triumphs, his tragedies, and his unraveling. A child king in a complicated world. At 10 years old, Richard II possessed grace, intelligence, and the golden-haired charm of a storybook prince. He was raised in the royal apartments of the Tower of London, watched carefully by advisors, uncles, and counselors. London liked him immediately. Children, after all, cannot tax you heavily or drag you into unnecessary wars. Life in the city resumed with familiar rhythm. Merchants haggling at Cheapside, bakers shouting prices, ships crowding the Thames, guild apprentices hauling goods, priests ringing bells, officials scribbling in cold offices, and citizens muttering, "At least he seems polite." But outside London, the kingdom simmered. Years of war with France had drained England's treasury. The Black Death had slashed the labor force. Wages were rising. Landowners were furious. Taxes soared. Tensions rose like heat from a summer street. Something was going to give, and it would give in London's own backyard. 1381, the year the city caught fire. The spark was a tax, a harsh, unfair, deeply resented poll tax. That hit peasants hardest. When royal agents tried to enforce it in Essex and Kent, the countryside erupted. Thousands marched toward London, led by a common man named Wat Tyler and a charismatic priest named John Ball, who preached, "When Adam delved and Eve span, who then was the gentleman?" A simple question, a revolutionary one. By June 1381, the rebel army camped outside London. The city trembled. Walls were strong. The tower was strong. But anger, when shared by thousands, is stronger than stone. London opens its gates. The rebels demanded entry. City officials hesitated. Merchants panicked. Guilds debated. The air filled with arguments, fear, and clattering boots. And then, someone opened the gates. We don't know who. A sympathizer? A fearful citizen? A rebellious apprentice? But once opened, the flood poured in. Rebels swept into the city like a storm, breaking through a window, setting fires, freeing prisoners, attacking officials, destroying tax records, burning mansions of hated nobles, smashing symbols of royal authority. London was engulfed in fury and flame. The streets echoed with shouts, the crackling of fire, and the ringing of alarm bells. The rebels surged toward the Tower of London, and inside that fortress, the boy king, 14 years old, waited. The tower breached. The tower, normally impregnable, was overwhelmed. Rebels forced their way inside. They found officials hiding. They found clerks terrified. They found the Archbishop of Canterbury, the king's own chancellor. He was dragged out and killed on Tower Hill. Blood on stone, screams over the river, firelight flickering on the white tower's walls. London had seen violence before, but not like this. Never like this. The city felt as though history itself were splitting open, and in the middle of it, a young king faced the impossible. Richard meets the rebels. On June 14th, 1381, Richard II rode out to Mile End to meet the rebel army, tens of thousands of men, armed with pitchforks, axes, and righteous fury. He was 14, small, beautiful, terrified, but unbroken. London held its breath, and then something remarkable happened. Richard spoke, calmly, clearly, bravely. "My good people," he said, "I am your king. I will grant your demands. Go home in peace." Shock rippled through the rebels. A boy king was promising justice, fairness, freedom. Many believed him. Many knelt. Many went home. But Wat Tyler did not. He wanted more. Too much. And the next day, at Smithfield, he confronted Richard again. During an argument, Tyler was struck down by the Lord Mayor of London. Chaos erupted. Rebels shouted. Knights drew swords. London froze. And then Richard did the bravest thing of his entire reign. He rode forward alone toward a crowd of thousands who had just watched their leader die. "Follow me," he said. "I am your captain now." The rebels faltered. Their fury broke. London exhaled. In that moment, Richard II saved his city. A king who peaked too early. After the Peasants' Revolt, Richard II was hailed as a hero. London loved him. He had been courageous when seasoned nobles had not. But Richard was 14, and adolescence is rarely the foundation of lifelong wisdom. As he grew older, his pride grew with him. He began to see kingship not as duty, but as destiny, not as service, but as divine right. He surrounded himself with favorites. He punished critics. He built magnificent palaces. He embraced ceremony and symbolism with a passion bordering on obsession. London admired the pageantry for a while. The city loved feasts, festivals, banners, parades. But underneath the gold cloth, taxes grew heavy. Justice grew uncertain. Council meetings became theatrical. Royal spending spiraled. And London began to worry. The tyranny years. By the 1390s, Richard II was no longer the brave boy of 1381. He was unpredictable, vindictive, convinced of his own semi-divine status. He punished London's leaders for the slightest offense. He weakened the city's political rights. He interfered with guild elections. He fined the mayor. He intimidated merchants. He demanded loyalty at all costs. Londoners grumbled in taverns. He forgets who finances the kingdom. He forgets who keeps the ships moving. He forgets who paid for his coronation robes. Old resentment simmered. And then something happened that changed everything. The rise of Henry Bolingbroke. Richard's cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, was exiled unjustly. His lands were seized illegally. His honor was insulted. It was a mistake. Henry was popular, charismatic, and deeply connected to London's merchant elite. When Richard left England for Ireland in 1399, Henry returned. London reacted instantly. The merchants backed him. The guilds backed him. The Tower opened its gates to him. Crowds cheered his arrival. London had chosen its side, and that side was not the king. The fall of Richard II. Richard returned too late. He was captured, deposed, and imprisoned. He died mysteriously in 1400. Some say starvation. Some say murder. Some say despair. London did not celebrate his fall, but it felt relief. The release of a city tired of uncertainty. A new king rose, Henry IV, the first Lancastrian monarch. And London, practical and loyal to its own survival, embraced the new dynasty. Richard II's legacy in London. Richard II left behind. Westminster Hall expanded with an enormous hammer beam roof. New artistic styles. A more sophisticated court culture. Records of ceremony, poetry, and ritual. A dramatic reminder of what happens when pride rises higher than wisdom. London survived him. It always survived. And now, as the 14th century drew to a close, the city stood on the edge of a new era, an era of Lancastrian kings, foreign wars, internal rebellions, religious transformation, and the dawn of a new century that would test the city again and again. But for tonight, rest. The next chapter, the Wars of the Rose's first shadows, awaits another evening.
And so, my friend, our final journey through Plantagenet, London, comes to a close. We have walked through the iron rule of Edward I, the troubled fall of Edward II, the victories and sorrow of Edward III, the terror of the Black Death, and the rebellion that shook the reign of Richard II. Through war, famine, plague, political conflict, and the rise and fall of kings, London endured. Its merchants returned to the markets, its ships continued along the Thames, its bells rang again above crowded streets, its people rebuilt what history had broken. By the end of the 14th century, London was no longer simply a city ruled by kings. It had become a political force, a center of trade, law, culture, and survival, strong enough to influence the future of England itself. Now let the distant bells grow quiet. Let the torchlight fade along the river. London sleeps beneath the medieval night, and so, my friend, may you. Good night, traveler.